أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أمير المؤمنين، يا رحمة الله الواسعة، ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. According to historians, the act of worship has existed from the time of since the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings. Whenever there were humans, wherever there were humans, there were acts of worship. There were places of worship. In early civilizations, perhaps some lacked hospitals and healthcare centers, but they had places of worship. Acts of worship varied from the early times, from singing to dancing to recitals to meditating and to praying. Subjects of worship also varied from the early days. Some worshiped the sun, some worshiped the moon, some worshiped other humans, some worshipped fire, and others worshipped Allah Azza wa Jal. The need for worship is part of human nature, as some scholars point out. And proof of this need, the need to worship in every human being, is the respect and the honoring of great figures, heroes, scholars, political leaders. Some honor flags, countries. This honoring and respecting, some say this is a sign that humans are in need of worship. And if they are not told who to worship, they themselves find a subject to be worshipped. The Quran tells us that it is not only human beings that worship. Everything on the face of this planet and on the face of this universe worships, including animals, including the birds in the sky, and the fish and the whales in the sea, including trees and plants, even these walls, they all worship. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُم. Everything in this universe worships Allah, but you and I, we don't understand their worship. When animals worship, and when plants worship, and when trees worship. وَلِلَّهِ يَسْجُدُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Everything in the sky and the earth prostrates to Allah. But prostration varies from one object to another, from one living creature to another, but they all prostrate to Allah. In Islam, we see that the acts of worship are distinguished from other religions. In Islam, we have acts of worship that don't exist in other religions. We pray 5 times a day. We fast for an entire month. We give khums. We give zakat. The acts of worship in Islam are very distinguishable. While in other religions, they're not so distinguishable. For example, in Christianity, for some, worship is reduced to worshiping once a week on Sunday mornings. Or maybe right before going to sleep, you recite something as a prayer. But it is not something compared to the acts of worship that we have in Islam. We have prayers, we have fasting, we have pilgrimage to another city, to another country. This is incomparable to other religions. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We notice that in Islam, some laws have changed. If you look comprehensively at the laws of Islam, you see that some laws have changed. Some laws are no longer applicable today. However, the laws of worship are still the same. The same worship that existed during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it exists till today. Muslims worshipped 5 times a day and they prayed 5 times a day, they still pray 5 times a day. Fasting was for an entire month. During the month of Ramadan, we still fast during the month of Ramadan. They performed pilgrimage, we perform pilgrimage. And so on and so forth. Acts of worship have not changed. The laws of worship have not changed. If other laws have changed, as we mentioned 2 nights ago, that for example, the selling of blood was not allowed up till a century ago, things have changed. Today, scholars say that you could sell blood. Previously, some scholars would ban the playing of chess. Today, some scholars allow chess. Some laws have changed, but acts of worship do not change. Why? Some say that today is the day of, this is the age of technology. People are landing on the moon. This is the age of the internet. This is the age of Google. The world has become into a global village. So many things have changed, and we still have to pray, and we still have to fast for an entire month. The world is advancing, the world is changing, and we Muslims are still praying 5 times a day, and we still go to Hajj, and we still perform wudu and ghusl. Shouldn't these things change? Shouldn't the acts of worship change in Islam and adapt to the changing world? The answer is no. Acts of worship should not change. Just because the world changes, some needs do not change. We believe that worship is a human need. Just like we have a need to eat and drink, we have a need to worship. Just because it's the age of technology and the age of the internet and Google, does that mean that we should stop eating and drinking? And we shouldn't have 3 meals a day? Formerly, 1,000 years ago, people had 3 meals a day. Should people stop having 3 meals a day just because there's technology and there's advancements and there's scientific achievements? No. Things change, but needs don't change. The same way the body has a need for nourishment to eat and drink, the spirit has a need for spiritual nourishment, for worshiping, for praying, for fasting. The needs remain the same, even though things have changed. In fact, today, more than ever, during the age of technology and communication and transportation and scientific accomplishments, we are in even a dire need for worship. Today, humans need to worship more than they did previously. Yes, humans have made life easier. Transportation has become easier. You can go from one point of the world to the other point within hours. Communication. You're sitting in one part of the world and you see someone live on your phone. You don't even need to pay money. It's become very easy to see someone live. You see your children, you see your family members. Things have changed. Illnesses and diseases that people would die from centuries ago, today we're finding cures. They're finding cure for cancer. A person could have cancer for 10 years and he doesn't die. With all of these technological advancements and scientific achievements, yet still there's a need for worship. Look at the rates of depression. Today, depression is the world's #1 illness. And even the richest countries, the first world countries, the countries that have the most advancements, you see people are still not happy. People still have depression. The #1 medicine that is on demand across the globe are antidepressants. What does this tell you? This tells us that we human beings, as there's advancements, there's technological advancements, we've worked on our bodies. We nourish our bodies, our clothing. Today we have the best of foods. We have the nicest of clothing. We work out. We care for our bodies and our health, but we don't care for our spirits, our nafs. We care for our bodies and we nourish it and we feed it, but we keep our nafs, our spirit, starving. That is why today you see more than ever people committing suicide. 100 years ago, the suicide rates that we have today, did they exist 100 years ago? We have heavy drinkers today. Those who deal with drugs and consume drugs. Did we have this problem 100 years ago? I won't say 1,000 years ago. 100 years ago. We didn't have these technological advancements. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have smartphones. Right? Some people say that I can't live without my smartphone. I have to have it from morning till night. Some people, they sleep with the smartphone next to their head. They can't live without it. They can't live without communication. But are they happier? Life has become easier, but is it happier? No, it's not. Look around you. Are people happier? No, because there's something missing. What's missing is worship. What's missing is connecting to Allah Azza wa Jal. We're always connected to the internet from morning till night. You're at work, you're at school, you're at the park, and you still have to have the internet. You're connected to the internet. But are we connected to Allah Azza wa Jal? Something that's more important? Something that our nafs, our spirit, our soul needs? No, we've become disconnected. The more we advance, the farther we draw away from Allah Azza wa Jal. And thus, you see suicide rates. You see alcoholism. You see drugs. You see antidepressants. You see rates of depression. It's all because of lack of worship. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The happiest countries, my dear friends, are not the richest countries. Read statistics. The happiest countries are the most religious countries. The countries that are connected with God. the countries, the people that are satisfied with what they have, not the richest. In fact, the richest countries, you'll find the people that are least happiest. You might be living in a mansion. You might be driving a Lexus. You might have maids and servants. You might have all kinds of food on your dinner table. But this doesn't make you happy. It doesn't necessarily make you happy. You know the old saying that says, money can't buy happiness. That's true. Others say, well, it depends on where you shop. No, it doesn't matter where you shop. You could go shopping wherever you want. It's not about the money. It's about what you feed your heart and your mind. Worship, salah, prayer, fasting is food for the soul. The same way that we're waiting for iftar, and you want me to hurry up and finish this lecture so that we could have iftar. Let's pay attention to the soul as well, because this soul, it shouldn't be kept starving. It should be fed as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Islam realizes that humans need worship the same way that they need to eat and drink. So Islam has proposed several ways to worship. One is the physical worship, praying. Two is the financial worship. You worship with your money, khums and zakat. Three is a dietary worship, fasting. By fasting is a dietary worship. Four, there is a hygiene worship with wudu and with ghusl. Five, there's a political form of worship, like the Friday prayer and like Hajj. And six, there's a military worship, like jihad. Islam has fit in worship in all aspects of life. In all aspects of life. Worship is not condensed to the masjid and to praying. For us, as soon as we say the word worship, it means coming to the masjid, standing in the mihrab, and performing ruku' and sujood. No, my dear friends. Everything can be worship. Worship is not restricted to the mosque. Worship is not restricted to salah. You can worship Allah in many ways and in many places. As Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, the famous scholar, the famous martyr, may Allah be pleased with him and have mercy on his soul. He says that any place that you please Allah will turn into a mosque. A mosque is a place that Allah has worshipped, correct? Any place where you worship Allah, you please Allah, you serve Allah, it turns into a mosque. If you go out on the street and you see an old lady or an old man trying to cross the street, but there's cars coming left and right, and you help this old lady and old man cross the street, that street becomes a masjid. It becomes a mosque. Because right there and then you worshipped Allah. Wherever you worship, your workplace. If you help your co-workers, people at your workplace, your job becomes a masjid. It becomes a mosque. Worshipping doesn't necessarily mean performing wudu and coming and standing and saying Allahu Akbar and worshipping. No. When you serve others, when you help others, the brothers and sisters that serve iftar after salah, that's worship. When you help clean the mosque, that's worship. When you pick up the trash, that's worship. Helping people in the community, those that don't speak English, you translate for them, that's worship. If you do these things for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal and you want Him to be pleased with you, that's worship. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he noticed two brothers, siblings, from the same mother and father. One remained in his mosque, in the Prophet's mosque, from morning till night worshipping, reciting Quran, always on tahara, on wudu, praying. And that person had a brother who would serve him, who went to work, who made a living, and he would bring food for his brother worshipping at the mosque, and he would take food to that worshipper's family at home. So one would worship all day, and the other would work to serve the one worshipping and to serve his family. Rasulullah said, you know who's worshipping? The one who's working is worshipping. That's the greater worship. In Islam we're taught that a person who goes out to work, who comes back home from work tired, sweating, exhausted, hungry, this person's a worshipper. In fact, he's not just a worshipper. He's as if he entered the battlefield and he killed enemies of humanity and enemies of Allah. Al-Amil al-Kaddu ala ayalih kal-mujahidu fi sabilillah. This is worship. See, Islam, it's compromising. It includes all of these acts that are done for humanity, for the good of humans and humanity. Islam considers all of these acts as worship. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, is worship mental or physical? Some say that my worship is mental. I don't need to stand and perform wudu and pray and get myself tired. This is not what Allah wants from me. Allah wants me to concentrate, to think about Him, thank Him. Intellectual worship, mental worship. I don't need to get up and pray and fast and go to Hajj. Others, on the other hand, their worship is all physical. They stand, they bow, they prostrate, they perform sujood. You ask them, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? They don't know. During salah, their mind wanders everywhere. They don't concentrate and pay attention to their salah. It's purely physical. Both groups are wrong. In Islam, my dear friends, worship is both mental, intellectual, and physical. Islam recognizes that people, when they worship, they have both physical needs, the physical need to worship, and the intellectual need, the mental need. That's why Islam says, to satisfy the physical need of worship, Islam says, face the Qibla. This is physical. Stand. This is physical. Perform ruku' and sujood. This is physical. Go to Mecca. This is physical. Perform tawaf around the Kaaba. This is physical. At the same time, Islam recognizes that people have a mental need to worship. Mental needs. Intellectual needs. Here, Islam says, concentrate on your salah. Know what you're saying. Don't just say words that you don't understand. Know what you're saying. Pay attention. Have your thoughts with Allah Azza wa Jal. So in Islam, both mental and physical needs of worship are meant. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We have some acts of worship in Islam. We could do them individually and we could do them socially. But the social reward is a lot greater than the individual reward. As an example, salah. Salah, you could do it individually. You could sit at home, remain at home, and pray. However, if you do it communally, socially, you come together and you pray together, that salah has a greater effect. Not just the rewards, not just the points that are recorded for us. No, but the effect. The effect, when you pray together, when you look to your right, to your left, everyone is standing, praying together, it's more beautiful. It's more spiritual. It makes you feel that you're not the only Muslim out there. You're not the only one that's praying. You're not the only one that believes in God, but there's everyone else. They also believe in God. They also have faith. They also want to come together and pray together. It has a stronger effect. That is why Hajj is a social worship. Hajj, those who go to Hajj, they come back, their faith has become stronger. Why? Because they realize that they're not the only ones. They're not the only ones. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created millions. And they all believe in Him. And they all sacrifice for Him. They're all willing to compromise their lives for Him. Imagine if you go to Hajj and you perform tawaf by yourself. Will it have the same effect when you perform tawaf with thousands of others, when you go to Arafah, imagine if you're by yourself. And imagine when you look and there's millions of people in Arafah and in Muzdalifah, doesn't it reinforce your faith? It reinforces your iman in Allah that you're not the only one, but there's millions of others along with you that have faith in Allah and love Allah and are willing to be good Muslims for the sake of Allah. Thus, Islam also emphasizes on social worship. Individual worship is good, but social worship is even greater. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In Islam, we are taught that contemplation and thinking is a form of worship. تفكر ساعة خير من عبادة 70 سنة. As in one hadith. To think for 1 hour is greater than the worship of 70 years. To think. Thinking is a form of worship. But to think over what? To think over what you're going to have for iftar tonight? Or what you're going to dress and wear? Or how you're going to spend your weekend? Or what you're going to do tonight? No. To think. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. Allah tells us of the signs of the believers, those who remember Allah while standing, while sitting, while sleeping, while lying down, and they think, my Lord, this sun, this moon, these stars, this beautiful planet, these mountains, these rivers. Oh Allah, you did not create all of these things out in vain and without a purpose. مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. I'm astonished at atheists. I'm astonished at scientists who are atheists. Those that know more than us how this planet came together. This beautiful planet. Everything is in detailed. It happened by coincidence? You're telling me that the sun and the moon and the stars and this planet and these rivers, these all happened by chance? By coincidence? Impossible. Impossible. If I tell you right now that I was out in the desert, and I found this phone, this iPhone. It's beautiful. It has Wi-Fi. It takes pictures. It allows me to call my family. And I found it in the middle of the desert. I found it in the sand. It just happened to be there by coincidence. Who's going to believe me? You're not going to laugh at me? And you say you found this phone in the middle of the desert? It just happened to be there? It just got together. Whatever makes this phone, it got together and you have a phone? Who would believe me? No one. But you tell me that this universe happened by chance? These beautiful human beings with beautiful minds and beautiful hearts and beautiful features, they just happen to be there? This is ridiculous. You know what happens? You know why? Because people are they're so obsessed with science, but they don't stop to analyze. They don't stop to analyze, how did these things get together? How is it possible? By chance. By chance. You know, Shahid al-Sadr, Sayyid Muhammad al-Sadr, he came up with a theory called the theory of probability. And he used it to prove God's existence. How? He said, look, okay. You know the distance between the sun and the earth? It's an exact distance, right? If we were just a bit closer to the sun, what would happen? We would all burn to death. If we were just a bit farther from the sun, what would happen? We would all freeze to death. Is that a coincidence? Let's say it's a coincidence. This distance between the planets, there's so many planets and so many stars. Did you ever hear of 2 stars and 2 planets crashing with each other? No. وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Every planet has its own orbit. You never heard of two planets crashing into each other. Is that a coincidence? Now you come to this planet, you come to this earth, the rivers, the mountains, the beautiful sights. Are those a coincidence? Human beings, our organs, our heart, our kidney, the way we breathe, everything about us, is that all a coincidence? How many times can a coincidence occur? A coincidence occurs once, twice, 3 times, but not 300 times. If you see your best friend in the morning, that's a coincidence. And then you see him an hour later, that could be another coincidence. But if you see your friend 10 times a day, is that a coincidence? It's not a coincidence. He's either stalking you or you're stalking him. It's not a coincidence. A coincidence occurs once or twice or 3 times, not 300 times. تَفَكُّرُ سَاعَةً. To think for an hour is better than the worship of 70 years. You see why? You see why? There's some people, they don't think. They just worship like a machine. They come to the masjid and they worship like a machine. This is not what Allah wants. Allah wants us to think as well. To use our brain, to use our mind. How did we get here? How did we end up here? What is my life all about? Do I have a goal in life? Or Allah just created me for fun, for amusement? If we think, we would not get ourselves into trouble, my dear friends. We would not resort to depression and to antidepressants and to suicide and to alcoholism. If we think about our life and where we're headed, what is our goal in life? What have I achieved? What have I done? Have I reached my goal in life? If I die today, will Allah be pleased with me? These are questions. And when we answer these questions, this is a form of worship. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Also, we are told that worship by itself is not enough. Worship by itself does not have value. Worship needs knowledge. Worship needs knowledge. There's a hadith that says, عبادة عالم واحد خير من عبادة ألف عابد. One scholar, his worship is more equivalent to the worship of 1,000 worshippers. 1,000. Why? Because this worshipper, he knows whom he's worshipping. He understands his worship. But 1,000 worshippers who don't understand, their worshipping is an exercise. Stand, sit. Their fasting is a diet. It's not fasting. It has no value. They're just going to lose weight. Hopefully. There's some that gain weight in Ramadan. Praying becomes an exercise. Going to Hajj becomes a vacation. Because it means nothing. It has no knowledge. Knowledge is very important in worship. You want your worship to be meaningful, it has to have knowledge. Let me give you an example. If you bring me the best movie made in Japan, 2 hours long, it might win the Oscar, but I don't understand Japanese, and you let me watch this movie for 2 hours, am I going to enjoy it? Am I going to enjoy this movie and be entertained? No, because I don't understand a single word. If you take me to a person that I don't know, and that person, if they take a person to the President of the United States of America, but he doesn't know he's the President of the United States of America, how will he treat him? He's not going to pay him any respect, because he doesn't know him. If they take you to the grand marja of our time in Najaf, but you don't know him, you think he's a normal person, will you respect him? Will you kiss his hand? Will you ask the questions that you've been dying to ask? No, because you don't know him. Worship is the same. When you stand to worship Allah, but you don't know Him. You don't realize who He is. You don't realize what an important role that He plays in your life. Is your worship going to be the same as the worship of someone who knows Allah? Who knows Allah? You see, that's why the worship of our Imams was different from my worship and your worship. Regarding Imam al-Hassan, they say that when Imam al-Hassan would stand to pray, his face would turn yellow, pale, white. He would start shivering. He would start shaking. He would tell him, why, Ya Rasulullah? It's just a prayer. It's just a salah. Well, why are you getting worried? Imam al-Hassan would say, أتدرون بين يدي من أريد أن أقف بين يدي جبار السماوات والأرض. Do you know who I'm about to stand and pray in front of and speak to? You take it lightly? You think that salah is something to be taken lightly? You were standing to speak to Allah, and Allah is listening to us. That's why the worship of the Imams was different from my worship. That's why the worship of Amir al-Mu'mineen, as we will talk about, it was different from my worship and your worship. Imam Ali, when he would worship, he would fall on the ground, he would start shaking. He would go into a trance. He would go into a coma. Because he had knowledge. This knowledge plays a major role. In Ashura, Imam Hussein and his followers stood to pray. And Umar ibn Sa'd also stood to pray. You think they were the same? Umar ibn Muljam, Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam, the killer of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he also stood to pray. And he was also fasting on a day like this. Was it the same worship as Imam Ali? One had knowledge and the other didn't have knowledge. That's the difference. Worship is about knowledge. Worship without knowledge is useless. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another point to keep in mind, my dear friends, is moderation in worship. Moderation. A group of women came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the wives of the Sahaba. They came to Rasulullah and they complained. They said, Ya Rasulullah, our husbands, they fast all day and they worship all night. We want to have breakfast, lunch, dinner with them. They're fasting. At night, they want to pray. What kind of life is this? They've abandoned us. They've abandoned their social lives. They fast every day and they worship all night. Rasulullah, the next day, he came to the masjid and he scolded them. He said, which one of you abandons his wife at night and he fasts all day? What's going on? This is not my sunnah. I'm a prophet. There's no one greater than me. But I eat. I don't fast every day. I fast some days. I fast on Mondays and on Thursdays. I don't fast every day. And I don't worship all night. I worship some of the night. And the rest of the night, I have my wives. I go to my wife. I go to my family. I have my social life. You see, there should be moderation in worship. There's some that think the only way to get near to Allah is to fast every single day and to worship at night. No, that's not the case. There should be moderation in worship as well. You see, my dear friends, there's some that think it's all about quantity. Let's recite dua. You know, on Laylatul Qadr, and tonight is one of those nights, there's some that want to do everything. Let's recite this dua, that dua, 100 units, 100 rak'ah, and they spend the entire night in worship. That's good, but it's not all about quantity. It's about what? Quality. It's about quality. What good is it that you recite a dua for 2 hours, but you have no idea what you're reciting? You have no idea what you're reciting. It's about quality. Understand what you recite. Know what you recite. There's some and they pray 100 rak'ahs on Laylatul Qadr like machines, like robots. You don't have to do 100. Do 10, but pay attention to them. Know what you're doing. Pay attention to the salah. Perhaps, and I've said this in my other lectures, perhaps 20 minutes of worship, of dua, is greater than 2 hours of worship and dua. If it's 20 minutes, you're paying attention, you take everything off your mind. You know, when we pray, why is it that we go like this? Why is it that we go like this on salah? You know what it means? When you say Allahu Akbar, it means everything is behind me now. Everything. My job, my business, my school, my family, my iPhone, my Twitter account, my Facebook account. I put everything behind me. You know, we do this, but you know what some people are actually doing? They do this. They bring everything in salah. As soon as he says Allahu Akbar, he thinks of, making a tweet. He thinks of someone's Facebook page. He thinks of what's going to happen tonight. I have a friend, he says that when I lose my glasses, the best thing I should do is pray. Because as soon as I pray, I remember where my glasses are. Is this what salah is meant to be? Salah is quality, my dear friends. Quality. Quality. 20 minutes of connecting only to Allah, pure connection, a pure Wi-Fi to Allah, is much better than 2 hours of nonsense, of saying things that you don't understand. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, one day he told his companions about a story. He told them a story. He said there was a man in Medina, a Muslim man, who had a Christian neighbor. He had a Christian neighbor. He went to his neighbor and he told him about Islam, about the good aspects of Islam, the beauty of Islam, and he was able to get his neighbor to convert to Islam. Beautiful. It's a beautiful act to get your neighbor to convert into Islam. The first day that this Christian became a Muslim, his Muslim neighbor, he came and woke him up for Salat al-Fajr. The person was sleeping. He woke him up and he told him, today is the first day that you're a Muslim, you have to pray. Let's go to the masjid. He took him to the masjid. He told him, we're here early. We have 30 minutes for Fajr. Let's pray Salat al-Layl. It's the first day that he's a Muslim. He's telling him, pray Salat al-Layl. He made him pray Salat al-Layl. And then they prayed Fajr together. He told him, you know what? It's discouraged. It's makruh to pray between Fajr and sunrise. So let's remain in the masjid. And let's recite Quran. They remained in the masjid and they recited Quran. After sunrise, he told them, what's the rush? Let's stay in the masjid. Let's pray. Let's worship. Why do you need to go home? They stayed. It was early morning. They wanted to go home. The Muslim told them, no. Salatul Dhuhr is only an hour from now. Let's stay. They stayed till Salatul Dhuhr. After that, they remained and they recited Quran. He told them, you know what? The Muslim tells his Christian friend, he told him, listen, we didn't have breakfast today and we didn't have lunch. So let's just fast today. Let's fast. So they fasted. He made him stay for us. And then he told him Maghrib is just an hour from now. He made him stay till Maghrib. And then Isha, they got back home by 10 p.m. The next day, 30 minutes before Fajr, he came to his Christian friend and he told him, let's go to the masjid. He told him, masjid? To hell with you and the masjid. I went back to being a Christian. If this is your Islam, to pray from morning till night and to fast every day, you can keep this Islam for you. Enjoy it. This is not the Islam that I want. Imam al-Sadiq, he told his companions, don't be like this person who got his neighbor to become a Muslim and then he got him to go back to Christianity again. Islam is about moderation. Moderation in everything. Moderation in eating, in drinking, in spending, and in worshipping. Islam tells us, don't make yourself hate worship. Don't make yourself hate worship. I was asked a couple of weeks ago, I was at a session with youth, there was a Q&A. One of the youth, they asked me, sometimes I don't feel like praying Salat al-Layl. I'm tired. I told them, don't. Don't. If you're not up to it, don't force it upon yourself. You know why? Because you will hate it. You will hate it. It's like your favorite food, your favorite meal. And I know we're smelling some very good scents right now of the iftar. Your favorite meal, if you are forced to eat it, do you think you'll enjoy it? No. You will not enjoy doing anything that you're forced. And it's the same thing It's the same thing with worship. If you are forced to perform worship, if you force it on yourself, you will always associate it in your mind with negatively. You'll have a negative association of salah. That you were tired, you were sleepy, and you were forced to pray salah. Don't force it upon yourself. If you can, great. If you can't, wait for the next night. Be up to it. There's a hadith that says, إِنَّ لِلْقَلْبِ إِقْبَالٌ وَإِدْبَارٌ. That the heart, sometimes it wants to worship and sometimes it doesn't. Don't force it on yourself. Of course, I'm not talking about mandatory worship. No. That is a mandatory. That is mandatory. Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, that is mandatory. I'm talking about recommended. You don't have to force it on yourself. Do it when you can so that you enjoy it more. Worship is meant to be enjoyed. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's come to Imam Ali alayhi salam. How did Imam Ali worship? Imam Ali alayhi salam says, إِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ خوفا من ناره فتلك عبادة العبيد. There are some people that worship Allah out of fear of hellfire. These people are slaves. Slaves. You know, slaves, if you don't punish them, if there's no fear of punishment, they won't work. وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ طَمَعًا فِي جَنَّتِهِ فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ التُّجَّارِ. And there are some people that worship because they want paradise. That's the only reason. These people are merchants. Merchants, they trade. I worship for paradise. So if there's no paradise, I won't worship. وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبِدُوا اللَّهَ شُكْرًا فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. And there's a third group that worship Allah out of gratitude. Not because they fear hellfire. Not because they want paradise. They would worship Allah even if heaven and hell did not exist. They would still worship Allah. Out of gratitude. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he would say regarding himself, Ilahi ma abadtuka hina abadtuk خوفا من نارك ولا طمعا في جنتك ولكن وجدتك أهلا للعبادة فعبدتك. Oh Allah, when I worship you, I don't worship you because I'm afraid of your hellfire. You know, there's some parents, they tell their children, pray, there's hell. If you don't pray, you'll go to hell. Why? Why do you scare your children of Allah and of hellfire? Tell them if you don't pray, you will not go to heaven. Why do you threaten them with hellfire? This is a problem that we have. We scare our children from Allah. We make Allah seem like a monster. Allah is not a monster. Allah Arhamur Rahimeen. Allah is the all-merciful, the all-compassionate. Oh Allah, Imam Ali says, when I worship you, I don't worship you because I'm afraid of your hellfire, nor I have interest in your paradise, but because I found you worthy of being worshipped. I found you worthy of being worshipped. No one else is worthy of my worship other than you, O Allah. Because you are you, and I am I. I am a servant, and you are the Lord. I am the created, and you are the creator. It's obvious. It's logical that the created worships the creator. The servant worships the Lord. Imam Ali alayhi salam, what kind of worship did he have? One day Abu Darda says that we were sitting with Imam Ali alayhi salam along with other companions. Imam Ali got up and he started walking by himself. He said, I followed Imam Ali to see where was he going. Where was he going? He said he went into the middle of the forest, in between trees. I followed him. I saw him. He stood in the middle of the forest and he started praying. He prayed and prayed and prayed until he fell to the ground, crying and wailing until the time of Fajr. He said, I went to wake him up for Fajr. I saw that Imam Ali was as stiff as wood. I said, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ali ibn Abi Talib has died. I went to Fatima al-Zahra. I knocked on their door and I said, my dear lady Fatima, I offer my condolences on the death of Ali. She smiled. She said, what's wrong? He said, I found him lying in the forest. She said, Ya Abu Darda, This is something that happens to Ali ibn Abi Talib every single night. Every single night. This is the worship of Imam Ali. And the battle of Siffin, when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was injured, Imam Ali was injured, an arrow pierces through his leg. His leg. An arrow went through. They tried to take out that arrow. It was very painful. And Imam Ali couldn't handle the pain. He couldn't handle the pain. Imam al-Hassan, he said, I have a plan. I have an idea. You know when's the best time to take that arrow out of the leg of Imam Ali? During his salah. During his salah. Because in salah, his attention is only for Allah. And indeed, during salah, they came and they took out the arrow from the leg of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali, he would stand in his mihrab. Dharar ibn Dhamara says that I saw my master Imam Ali standing in his mihrab, crying, holding his blessed beard and shaking. And he would say, Ya dunya ghurri ghayri, abi ta'arrafti, am ilayya tashawwaqti, qad tallaqtuki thalathan. He would speak to dunya, that, oh dunya, I have divorced you. Go and find someone else to seduce and to trick. Not Ali ibn Abi Talib. The worship of Ali ibn Abi Talib was inspired by love, my dear brothers and sisters, not by fear. Read Dua Kumayl. Read Dua al-Sabah. Read all of the supplications of Imam Ali. There's no fear. Oh Allah, don't punish me. Oh Allah, don't put me in hellfire. No. It's all about love. Imam Ali says in Dua Kumayl that, my Lord, if you put me in hellfire, you know what the greatest punishment is? My greatest punishment is not that if you put me in hellfire. My greatest punishment is that you put me in hellfire and that you do not love me. And you don't wish to hear my voice. And you ignore me. This is my greatest punishment, my Lord. فَهَبْنِي فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك. Tonight, Amir al-Mu'mineen is reciting his munajat. Amir al-Mu'mineen is preparing for departure. Amir al-Mu'mineen is reciting his salah, is reciting his dua. But Amir al-Mu'mineen did not have the energy to stand. Amir al-Mu'mineen was on his bed, speaking to Allah, reciting his munajat, preparing himself for his final departure. On a night like this, Amir al-Mu'mineen was brought with food, some milk, some bread. Amir al-Mu'mineen had some of this food, and then he said, خُذُوهُ لِأَسِيرِكُمْ. Take this food to your prisoner, Ibn Muljam. Peace be upon you, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and on your merciful heart. He was surrounded by his children, by his sons, by his daughters. Zainab, Kulthum, Al-Hassan, Wal-Hussein. They could not stop crying. Zainab alayhi salam, she told Amir al-Mu'mineen, she said, my dear father, before you go, there's one question that I'd like to ask you. I have heard from Ayman a story that includes Karbala, Karbala. I have heard of the story of Karbala. Is it true, my father? Will I lose my brothers? Will these things really happen to me? Amir al-Mu'mineen began to cry. He said, my dear daughter Zainab, the story of Karbala is true. A day will come in which you will lose this brother Hussein, and you will lose Abbas, and it's as if I can see you will enter the city of Kufa, the city that you were raised in, the city that you lived in peacefully. With all respect, you will come back in this city as a captive. Have patience on that city, on that day. Finally, Amir al-Mu'mineen looked towards him and he said, فَلِمِثْلِ هَذَا فَلْيَعْمَلِ الْعَامِلُونَ. For these places in paradise, let the good doers do the good deeds. He pointed to his place in paradise, and then he looked towards his family and he said, do not cry. They began to weep and they began to cry. He said, do not weep. This is the moment that I have been waiting for. Amir al-Mu'mineen extends his hands and his legs and he said, وَعَلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامِ يَا مَلَائِكَةَ رَبِّي. Peace be upon you, O the angels of my Lord. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Imam Ali closed his eyes and his soul departed his body. أين المنادي وعليا ومظلوما ومسموما. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. هجا بفرمایید. شما دعا بفرمایید. يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا شملا إلا جمعته ولا مرضا إلا شفيته ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذه ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه. ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.